Hi there. Following a meeting with some residents and leaseholders last night, I was asked to do a quick presentation to explain the management structure at Dryden Court and the checks and balances which are in place to ensure that the property is well managed. So this is a lightning run through what we have. Now, the most important people are, of course, the leaseholders and the residents. At the moment, there are 113 flats, 19 garages, a couple of storerooms. In total, you've got about 134 different service charge accounts. And it would be normal for the leaseholders and residents to be represented by Residents and Leaseholders Association. And they would be the spearhead for the management of the property. And of course, any individual can then be part of that association. No one is excluded, and they are the rightful managing team for the property. But you also require professionals, and of course, the professional day to day management is run by the managing agent, and that between those three, you have a nice triumvirate of how the property should be run on a day-to-day basis. Now, I think a lot of the confusion has come into place because in recent years, we've had issues with Dryden Court freehold taking over the day-to-day running of the property, and worse, just one or two individuals, maybe even just one individual, who believes that they are beyond accountability. Now, going back to 1996, we had 54 leaseholders who joined together to buy the freehold of the company. I was one of them. And we set up Dryden Court Freehold Limited, and that bought the freehold of the of the property. And it is the job of those 54 leaseholders to appoint a board, and it's the job of the board to act in the best interest of the company, Dryden Court Freehold Limited. What it does not have is any authority to rule as a cabal over the day-to-day running of the property, because it only represents the interest of 54 leaseholders. And as I was explaining earlier, we have 134 different service charge accounts. So what we're saying is roughly 70% of people have no say in the running of the property. And of course, this is where all the confusion has come from. What the board does have a right to do is to entrust the day-to-day running of the property to an independent trustee. Now, about 20 years ago, we set up Dryden Court Trustees Limited to bring it in-house, but that was always conditional that we would have an independent third-party trustee who had no allegiance to Dryden Court Freehold Limited. It was a natural check and balance to the power of running the property. And when we set it up, Alan Scudder became the first trustee. And when he stepped down, we installed Anthony Bird. Unfortunately, Anthony was then removed by an individual, or maybe the board of the freehold company, at which point they asked me, Edward Brown, to step in. And of course, I was happy to help, but it was really more sensible that it was handled by a professional. But nevertheless, it meant that the leaseholders of Dryden Court were saving 5,000 or 6,000 a year by having a non-professional. Now, unfortunately, I resigned in about 2015, 2016, because there was a boardroom coup when the board decided that they would appoint the managing agent, which was completely unconstitutional. It is the role of the trustee to appoint the managing agent and the surveyor and the auditor. But when the freehold board took over control, they removed the surveyor, and there hasn't been a surveyor responsible for the property for 10 years. They handed over the power of the managing agent from KFH to RMG. RMG was previously called Erinaceous and had been fired 10 years before when they lost over £100,000 of leaseholders' money in a failed energy contract from which they were making quite substantial profits, and we picked up all the liabilities. It's extraordinary. Gone back to RMG, they put us back into another appalling energy contract, which, needless to say, was not eligible for any of the price helps or price caps that the government installed during the early part of the Ukrainian conflict. Now, moving on, if we just combine those two slides very quickly, we can see that the single most important group of people are the leaseholders and residents of Dryden Court. And no one else has a right to rule over these people or us as if they are some sort of baronial lord from the past. It is true that 54 leaseholders from amongst us own the freehold company, and that is, and as I was saying before, they can appoint a board, they can appoint the trustee, and the trustee can in turn appoint the managing agent, and the surveyor and the auditor. The problem we've got at the moment is the current trustee is the chair of the freehold board, and so an essential check and balance of power has been removed. Finally, there is no residents association, and it's really the residents association that should be running everything at Dryden Court, because then every leaseholder would have a fair say in how things are operating. So the confusion has arisen because individuals in the freehold board who are elected by maybe as few as half a dozen people who are shareholders in the freehold company have decided to take it upon themselves to run the day-to-day goings on at Dryden Court. And we have missed out on having the professionalism of a first-class managing agent, an independent surveyor who is responsible for creating a 10-year plan of works, which is what decides how much money goes into your reserve fund each year, make sure there's a proper schedule for the insurance, and of course is responsible for making sure that the apportioning of service charges is done in a professional manner. And the problem we have at the moment is we've got a fellow leaseholder who, simply because he is the chair of the board, has appointed himself as trustee and has appointed himself as surveyor and has taken upon himself to rearrange the apportioning of the service charges with absolutely no professional oversight whatsoever, which is why we need a new trustee on board. Anyhow, that was a quick run through. The result is the mess we have today at Dryden Court. And what, if you really want to get to the bottom of it, what is required is an independent trustee who can oversee what has happened. And of course, the chair of the freehold company says nothing untoward has happened, and I think we should take him at his word for that, in which case there should be absolutely no problem in getting third-party appraisal to make sure that there has been proper due diligence and we can all be assured that the chairman of the freehold company is correct and the allegations of financial impropriety are just that, allegations. That is the solution. Get yourself a free, third-party, independent trustee to look after our property. Okay, hope that helps with the running of the property and your understanding of how the property should be run. Basically, it is the role of the Residents Association to look after the day-to-day running, and the freehold company has absolutely no business at all getting involved in anything to do with the day-to-day running because they only represent 54 shareholders, and that's it. Okay, hope that helps. Bye.